Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and you're very welcome to this week's edition of DriveThru Sports Weekly. With the international break being on in the soccer, I will be brutally honest and say I thought between that and the cessation of GAA activity once again that we might be a little bit short on material to make up this week's show, but as hopefully some of you have seen in the last couple of hours, we brought you the story on boilandtalksport.com that ahead of the resumption of the National Football League at the weekend, Meath boss Andy McEntee has received a major boost with the news that Cian McBride will be available to the Royal County for whatever length their season progresses this year, having been released during the off season of the Australian Football League by the Essendon Bombers. Now, McBride he came to prominence, I suppose, as a footballer, first of all in St. Patrick's Classical School in Navan, where many great Meath players got their first what you'd say was exposure to big time football, I suppose. And then from there, of course, he was one of the main catalysts on Meath underaged, under 17 and minor, while they were separate competitions, and then just the minor team and also the under 20 team before he was snapped up by Essendon, having been spotted by AFL scouts during one of the combine camps, which they unfortunately tend to run over here at various different times of the year. Now, I know that technically speaking, ahead of the game against Dublin next weekend, unfortunately, me don't have anything material to play for, as they are already relegated. I'm sure I'm not alone in wishing that, or thinking that the conclusion of the National Leagues would have been declared null and void, and therefore we might have managed to sneak our way back into Division 1 for another year. But look, that wasn't to be, so we just have to get on with what we have to get on with. As I say, technically there's nothing to play for in the two games left against Dublin and Monaghan, but I think in the psyche of any Meath man, there is no such thing as a game against Dublin meaning nothing, and I would have absolutely no doubt that Andy will have the lads fired up to go out at the weekend and give a good account of themselves. Look, as I said in the piece I wrote an hour or so ago, we can't be expecting miracles. I mean, it would be foolish to think that Dublin have been doing nothing while the lockdown has been in place. I think every team worth their salt in the country has probably been doing a bit of training, and the gulf between where we are and where we'd like to be isn't going to have suddenly evaporated over the last 6 months or 7 months. But I will say that while Meath hadn't picked up a point in any of their league games to date, they were probably very unlucky in a few of them not to come away with something. And if they could put up a good show against Dublin at the weekend, and maybe just sneaking out a win in Clonus the following weekend, it would leave them in a fairly good mindset, if nothing else, for going into what is going to be a strange bloody championship season starting on the 8th of November. Now, I am still of the opinion that there should be no inter-county championship going on at all, but they're going ahead with it, so we'll have to roll with it. And just to finish off where I was half going there a minute ago, while our lads might not have picked up a point in the league today, they can probably consider themselves to be quite unlucky for a couple of reasons. Firstly, they were very, very close to getting something out of a couple of the games. From what I can remember, it's that long ago now, you nearly have to refresh your mind a bit again. But secondly, for a lot of the games that were played, they were shorn of several of those who would be considered of incalculable loss to the team when they're not there. So knowing from observing the club scene as best as could be this year, with all that was going on, that some of those who had been injured for the early stages of the National League may well be available to the management to pick now going forward, could actually leave them in a slightly stronger position than what might have been thought to be the situation had the championship sort of proceeded at the time it was meant to have done and should have done. So it will be interesting to see what plays out in the weeks and months ahead. I suppose, look, and I'll get back to this in more detail, but I suppose even though it is bittersweet with being unable to attend games or certainly be at as many games as would normally have been the case, I suppose the other side of that coin is at least there is sport on the television to watch, and anything which I can lay my hands on to make the winter even seem a little bit shorter is only to be welcomed. So, and I will get back to this in detail later on, though when you see National Hunt racing back in Fairyhouse and not a sinner in the place, it does be a little bit hard to take. But look, we've got through everything this far, we'll get through this as well. But to return to Gaelic games, now I am in the middle of writing a piece for the site at the moment, which may be published either late this evening, or if not, it'll certainly be up tomorrow, which GAA will form a big part of it. Won't be the only part of it by any means, but it will form a big part of it. But just for the sake of while we're on GAA topics on the show for now, as is often the case with me, I found myself the other day reading the sports section of the Irish Independent from, say, the previous week, if you want to call it that. Now, that is often the case with me, even before Susie and I got together, when my office cum living space resembled a bomb site. There would be piles and mounds of newspapers around the place, and I would have been known to read them months, weeks, and maybe even months out of date or behind when they were originally published. But anyway, the other day I just came across Colin O'Rourke's piece in the Sunday Independent from about 8 or 9 days ago now, in which he was rightly paying tribute to Dermot Connolly after the St. Vincent's and Dublin Star had hung up his blue and navy boots, and it dawned on me that I either forgot about it in last week's edition, or what I think actually happened, we had gone to press, as they say, before the story broke that Connolly was retiring from inter-county football. Now, look, I can say it now because he's retired, and we don't have to sort of face off again and again. But Dermot Connolly was a mercurial talent, and is and still will be, I'm sure, with St. Vincent's for a good many years to come, you would hope. Look, if you weren't playing against him or trying to deal with him, he was the mercurial talent of his generation, really. I mean, you think, who could you compare him to? Well, I think, and this is only my own opinion, from looking back at videos of the old Dublin teams, say the grey team that would have entangled with Kerry for most of the 70s and early 80s, he always reminds me of Tony Hanahoe. Now, while most people who would have seen the football of the 70s area, particularly those who were around to see it in the flesh, which I wasn't, would have said that Brian Mullins was indisputably the best of what they came across, certainly from a Dublin perspective, or in some cases maybe between the two sides. But I would have to say that earlier in the summer, when I was working on my second book, Rolling Down Memory Lane, which, if I may just gently remind you all, is available to download off BoylanTalkSport.com for a £5. When I was researching for that during the summer, I watched as much of the old Dublin Kerry rivalry as I could get me paws on, and I would have to say, and this is only my own opinion, from that era I would have thought that Tony Hanahoe was in fact my favourite player of that Dublin team, because I'll tell you how I arrived at the conclusion. He, from, say, the decades that came after that, I would have felt that possibly Trevor Giles or Ja Fallon were cut of similar cloth in that very much the link man, playing with the head up, can pick a good pass off, can take a score. I would have always felt that there are two different ways to play the centre forward position, whereby you either have a number 11 that stands and more or less trades it with the centre back, like O'Rourke did himself during the 4 games against Dublin in 1991, with the result that the one and only time Keith Barr went on a sally up the field was when himself and Eamon Heary had made a very good attempt at knocking Colm unconscious, but the great man, even though he was off the field being brought around for a long time after it, did come back in and of course played a crucial role in the 2 Meath goals, especially Kevin Foley's, which effectively turned the tide in Meath's favour. But then, aside from that way of playing centre forward, you can also have what I like to think of as a floating centre forward. By that, in that, I'm thinking of players like, as I say, Giles and Ja Fallon and Brian McGuigan of Tyrone and Hanaho or Ogie Morden from the bygone era, if you want to call it that. And I would have felt that Connolly was absolutely in that mould as well, except probably the most naturally talented and diverse player of the whole lot of them, in that he had right foot, he had left foot, he could take scores, he could make scores. And when I say a floating role at centre forward, I'm talking the man that'll drop back into his half back line and come up with ball and link play and be more or less a runner, as to the traded model like I mentioned a moment ago. But I'm sure, and indeed I know because I've seen him doing it, Connolly could play the other way as well. But I'd be honest with you, to see Connolly at his natural best was actually to see him playing with St. Vincent's in the Dublin Senior Football Championship. Now, I know this line of work can sometimes be overrun with cliches, and I will be honest and say that I try to avoid them where at all possible, but he really was, to see him playing with Vincent, like he really was the conductor of the orchestra, and it didn't matter if they played him centre back, centre forward, full forward, wherever he was, his influences just smattered all over the game. And I actually will be honest and say that I did, until all this thing blew up, occasionally get in to see an odd Dublin Senior Football Championship game, and to be able to go in as a neutral and just watch the like of Connolly and Paul Mannion and Dean Rock and these fellas doing their thing, and just observe how they do what they do, is just to see football at a completely different level, and no matter what vast or riches Dublin undoubtedly have, and I'm not saying they haven't because they have, no matter what they have, to take somebody of Connolly's natural ability and flair and flamboyance out of any setup will leave a void that will be hard to fill. And I suppose another reason why he was my type of player, I suppose a favourite phrase of mine comes to mind as well, in that he definitely falls into the flawed genius bracket, in that he not only did he play, and I'm sure the same would still apply at club level, play a little bit close to the edge. He in fact went over it on more than one occasion. But do you know what? All the best players have that little streak in them. Every team needs one, and I would much rather take the risk, carry a fella that you know could be an absolute genius with a ball, rather than a fella that's going to put the brakes on when there's a 50-50 ball going and the fat is really in the fire. So no matter what vast array of resources Dublin may have, there will certainly be the poorer for not having Dermot Connolly available to them. And as spectators and those who enjoy looking at top quality sport, no matter who's involved, we, the viewing public, are certainly going to be the poorer for Connolly not being involved either. So it'll be interesting to see how Dublin reshape things going forward now without him. Now, moving on to horse racing, and it is indeed a great pleasure to be able to say that we have quite a lot to get through on this front this week. As I'm sure some of you will have seen by now, I hope, I did post a shortish article yesterday evening, just running through all of what had gone on yesterday, but it suffice to say it was a absolutely wonderful weekend's racing from a local perspective. And when I say local, I am delighted to be able to say that I can literally include Dunboyne in that this week, following the victory of Lusstown Baba in the second race at the Curragh yesterday. Now, this filly by the she is a Dancing Duchess filly who the owner, Finn Sheedy, who set up the Back Road syndicate, actually owned the dam Dancing Duchess, who was a useful enough animal in her own right, formerly trained by Owen Weldon. Finn then, as I say, it was actually Finn's father, I believe, who actually bred Lusstown Baba, and Finn then set up the syndicate of local lads, and they were called the Back Road Syndicate. Now, for anyone not from Dunboyne, I'll just give a little bit of a local history lesson, I suppose you could say. There is a road. Now, there are many back roads around Dunboyne, as I'm sure there are around every town and place in the country, but there is one road that to 99.9% of locals and indeed people who come into the village, it will be introduced to them as the back road, or just simply the back road. Officially, it would be said that it is called Kennedy Road because it was presumably named that in honour of JFK. That's the only explanation I've ever heard of it, or indeed nobody has ever told me any different, but to 99.9% of the population of the area, if you said Kennedy Road to them, a queer look would be the least you might receive. But anyway, the Back Road Syndicate. So Lusstown Baba has now won 3 races for them, which from a flat racing perspective, obviously, first and foremost, would leave her a very valuable commodity as a broodmare going forward. But I was delighted to hear Willie McCreary saying after the race on the television that they had, as of now anyway, they've no plans to retire her. Now, what I don't know, and because I'm sure I've been round racing long enough at this stage to know that there will be no plans like this made immediately after the race or anything like it, but you know, I would love to know whether the intention is to step her up in class into group company straight away, or whether to let her off and maybe go for something early in the new year, maybe out foreign or something. I know this time last year, after she had won the foreign series final at Naas, there was talk of her going for a biggish enough race somewhere in France in March, but of course COVID-19 probably put an end to that. But given the fact that she very obviously likes a bit of cutting the ground, I would be just interested to see, will they take a chance with her, either at home or abroad before the year's end, or bring her back maybe very early in the spring to have a go at something on softish ground early in the year. But look, one can only look on enviously from the outside, because it's a nice problem to have. And the one thing, as I say, I was delighted to see was Willie more or less confirming that she will stay in training next year again, because I think, look, I know from a bloodstock and a breeding point of view, flat racing is what it is, and it has to be as it is. But um, I think one of the things that makes it difficult for me to become overly enamoured about the action on the flat is that you see these horses for 1 year, maybe two, and then they're going off to the breeding sheds. Now I have noticed in recent years that there definitely has been a shift towards letting horses train on a bit longer. Well, I suppose colts or geldings in particular, but even with some mares too. But I suppose when you see local success like the lads had yesterday, it does. Well, for me, I suppose, and this is just me being brutally honest, I suppose it is a double-edged sword because, of course, naturally, you'd be delighted for the lads involved, and even from a bare journalistic point of view, it's great to have material to be writing up or recording up or about or whatever you want to call it, because while from a journalist point of view I try to keep a broad eye across everything and write about as big a variety of stuff as I can, there is no doubt that being able to put a local angle on stuff, well, firstly, it's more enjoyable from my own point of view in some cases, and secondly, naturally enough, it will generate a bit more of readership, although I must say I have been absolutely blown away by the numbers the site has been attracting in the last 3 weeks or a month or so, and my sincere thanks to each and every one of you. Your support is greatly appreciated and is a large part of the reason why I do what I do, and as long as I can keep churning out something that keeps you guys interested, that's what makes the whole thing worthwhile. So I would have absolutely no doubt that the like of the lads' success yesterday will generate a great reaction locally, and I don't just mean that in terms of this website, but it will give the place a much needed lift, because there's other things going on outside of life outside of sport rather, and it makes you think, like, I mean, I know I will hold my hands up and say outright that being unable to attend sporting events, whether it be GAA matches or rugby matches or soccer matches or race meetings, yes, it leaves me upset and angry and frustrated, but when you look at what some other people are going through, and I will get to that before the end of today's show as well, it makes sport and things pale into insignificance. But anyway, before I drag the tone of the show and my own emotions down too far, we must pick up again, and even though I know I will be slated for being slightly biased here in this instance, I honestly do not care. From a personal perspective, outside of the lads having their great victory yesterday with Lusstown Baba, outside of that, the major highlight for me within racing lately has been the outstanding form which Noel Meath's horses have continued to maintain both on the flat and over jumps. And look, nobody needs any further description of what I think of Noel Meath or how Noel Meath has helped me over the years without even possibly knowing or realising it himself. But regardless of whether I had any special link to the man or to Tuva at all or not, you know, it is beyond question that the form of his horses and the success he has achieved this year so far have been quite remarkable when you consider that he's heading rapidly towards his 7th decade himself, and his 5th 10-year period of being within the training ranks. Now, before anyone says that about age or that, yes, I know Kevin Prendergast is older and is a truly remarkable man whom I would hope to be able to meet someday, because you know, to see a man at his age, which I think is mid-80s, I'm not going to put an actual number on it because I'm not entirely sure, but to see the likes of himself and indeed Frank Oakes, I have to mention Frank as well, but to see them men training at all at their age is absolutely a tribute to them, and nothing short of inspirational to me, and I'm sure to a lot of people who are also in racing, or even those who may be looking at racing from the outside in, but to remain training, and of course I should throw Arthur Moore in there as well, who was also in the winners during the week, but to be still in the training ranks is commendable enough, but to see the great Kevin Prendergast send out a treble at Dundalk last Friday evening, it just, even though the 3 winners were for Sheikh Hamdan Al Maktoum, to whom money obviously would be no object, and you know, Sheikh Hamdan is a good supporter of a lot of Irish yards, as well as numerous ones in England where he employs Jim Crowley as his retained rider. But besides the fact that money certainly wouldn't be an object where he was concerned, there are 2 things that stick out in my mind. One, it tells you the esteem in which Kevin Prendergast is held, and rightly so, that the likes of Sheikh Hamdan would still send him horses at this stage of his career. But I tell you, from my own personal point of view, the biggest kick I got out of it, well, I can turn it a little bit from a different angle and say, well, if he's still able to do that at his mid-80s, or you know, there's no reason why I can't at least have a go at doing some of the things that I want to do in life, including possibly getting, well, possibly getting back into uh, racehorse ownership. When I say back into it, some of you may know or may not know that a good friend of my father's, the late Holly Cunningham, God be good to him, was horses on the brain, basically, between breeding them and buying them and selling them and having horses and training and all the rest of it. And for what was all too brief a period, I was, I suppose, what you could call Ollie's racing manager, in that I used to make all the phone calls and do all the talking with Tom Taff and fill Ollie in on what was going on with the horses and how they were working and where they were entered and where they might run. And so I suppose I was the local version of Frank Berry or Eddie O'Leary or Teddy Grimthorpe or whoever you want to call it. But I won't lie, I would love to get back in that close to the action again. I sort of wish some of the local syndicates had approached me when we were starting out, and I may have got on board with some of them, but as we know, I did get back into the farming, and I've had 6.5 great years of that. Circumstances conspired against me this year for a variety of different reasons, and I would earnestly hope to get back into it at some level or some type of farming properly in the new year, and certainly every available avenue will be explored, but I won't lie to you, if the opportunity arose again to get back into the horse end of things, I would most likely jump at that too. But anyway, where all that arose from was that if the opportunity did ever crop itself up again, that I would earnestly hope that it would be by way of getting involved with Noel Meath. Yes, for entirely sentimental reasons, but look, there's no harm in that either, is there? And certainly the way his horses have been running of late, both on the flat and over jumps, have certainly given me the goo back again to even think about seeing is it worth exploring, because yesterday at the Curragh he made it 2 Group 3 winners in a matter of weeks, when Helvic Dream followed up what Elysium had already done at the same venue. Difference being that on this occasion Helvic Dream won as he liked, with what appeared to be absolute bagfuls in hand, as Colin Keane was more or less left with what amounted to no more than a steering job. But good and all as that was, I would have to say that from a local perspective it was not the headline grabbing occurrence of the day at the Kildare venue, because that accolade must go to John McConnell of Stamullen, who not only recorded his first winner at the flat headquarters at all, but also, well, this goes without saying, his first group winner when his representative in the Anglesey Stakes, wearing his own colours.
Bring that ass back like a boom, 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 boom,
A case of you, when I originally went to record this the John McConnell piece yesterday, I couldn't actually remember the horse's name, and for that I humbly apologise. But thanks to the wonders of modern technology, I did go off and have a look, and of course it was a case of you who was following up a very impressive victory a short time beforehand to, as I have said, not only give the trainer his first group winner, but indeed also his first winner at flat headquarters. Now, if you also add in that Sunday and indeed today, which is Tuesday as I'm talking to you, have both seen Colin Keane riding for Ballydoyle, one would think that would be enough racing news for any one weekly bulletin, but there have been other stories which I get to in a minute, but if I may just dwell on the point of our hopefully soon to be champion jockey again, linking up with the Aidan O'Brien and Coolmore operation, with the absolute best will in the world. I would earnestly hope that Colin would stay where he is with Jar Lines, because it's not that I don't believe Colin would be up to taking on the role. Of course he would. To my mind, he's now one of the best flat jockeys in the world. We, similar to the situation regarding National Hunt racing, we are blessed here in Ireland to also have some of the best exponents of horseman and horsewomanship in the world in the flat racing sphere as well, and there's absolutely no doubt that Colin Keane, to my mind at least, belongs in the same bracket as Frankie Dettori or William Buick or Sylvester de Souza or Andrea Zani or any of the top lads earning their crumbs across the water. And what is more, I would put any of them ahead of Ryan Moore, who I would firmly believe that Ryan Moore is one of the most, if not the most, overrated individuals ever to throw his leg over a horse. I mean, let's be honest about it. The quality and quantity of horses that Coolmore and Ballydoyle produce are such that, with the greatest respect in the world, the man on the street could nearly saddle up on them and come home victorious. But as regards world class jockeys or that, I mean, if Coolmore are seriously considering defenestrating with Moore's services, not only is it completely understandable, but I would also feel that rather than William Buick or some of the other names that have been thrown around in connection with the job, that they could very much do worse than look within their own camp, as it was already. I suppose to some extent age would play against Jamie Heffernan in that instance, even though it's been proven time and time again that the man is more than capable of performing at the top level anywhere in the world. The same could be applied to Wayne Lorden. Our own Pádraig Beggy, of course, has won multiple classics for the operation, and Emmett McNamara has done likewise in getting on the classic winning Roll of Honour this year or so, and Mickey Hussey is no back number either. But if they were genuinely considering replacing Moore, I would hope that they would replace from within rather than shall we say, tempting Colin Keane away from Glenburnie, because look, as I've said a minute ago, it's not that I feel Colin wouldn't be up to the job. Of course he would. When you see leading outside trainers both here and overseas giving him the leg up on their stock, it gives you an indication of the esteem in which the man is held. My own reservations regarding why I would rather see him not take it is simply that to look at it through a certain lens, the job is a poison chalice in that you look at some of the people that have it. Now, I know if you look at McKinnon, Johnny Murtagh, Kieran Fallon, all them lads, when they had the Ballydoyle job, were sort of in the last few furlongs of their career, and regardless of what they did or didn't do, the what can I say, the reverence which was rightfully accorded to them men wasn't going to change, regardless of what went on while they were in Ballydoyle. I mean, to only give a minuscule overlook into it, I mean, you had McKinnon, who when he finished in Ballydoyle went on to form a remarkable partnership with Sea the Stars, and we'll be talking about that more in a minute. Johnny Murta, I think, as far as I can remember, Johnny actually finished his riding career predominantly carrying the colours of Magner and Tabor and Smith and all the other add-ons that they have in their so-called syndicate. Now, if you call that a syndicate, it could make the rest of us feel very big about ourselves. Indeed, if if an ordinary person was thinking about getting into horse ownership, but I think in that instance, and this is only a side issue, but I think in that instance, to call that particular group of individuals a syndicate is to slightly turn the nose up at ordinary racing folk everywhere. But anyway, look, they're exceptionally good at what they do as regards breeding stock and that side of it, and they are, of course, blessed to have the best flat trainer in the world, as well as his two sons now, putting their stock into battle, and a lot of the time sweeping all before them when it comes to mopping up all the big prizes that flat racing has to offer. Now, the only flip side to that is that if you look at the like of John Magner in particular, you do not accumulate the wealth that Mr. Magner has garnered over the years, or the influence and clout that he wields over a large sector of society without having business acumen and plenty of clout and an ability not to suffer fools gladly. Now, the reason I mention that is that if you think back, and I can't remember exactly at what stage this was, it may have been after McKinnon, but I couldn't swear on it, when Jamie Spencer took the Ballydoyle job. Yes, he won plenty of big races for them, and I'm sure made an awful lot of money in the process of doing it as well, but I can't escape the feeling, and it was one that I had at the time when he was in position, and seeing the way things have gone in his career, and indeed regarding Ballydoyle in the intervening years only served to validate my inclination that he was slightly overwhelmed by being in the position at the time, and one only needs to look at the highly commendable career he has gone on to have riding in England, and indeed I'm sure gaining winners all over the world. Once the pressure cooker that is the Ballydoyle job was taken off his back, so to speak. And my reason for mentioning that is simply that while, look, in some ways, of course, it's the dream job for a jockey to go into Ballydoyle and ride all the good horses, go to all the big meetings. Yes, you clock up a lot of money and ride a lot of winners, and it'll be all rosy in the garden when things are going well. But one bad day, or one bad race even, and as I said a minute ago, John Magner hasn't got where he is in the world without having the ruthless streak required to make hard decisions to make a business successful, and as was proven on a couple of occasions, and there's one which I get to in a minute, he will absolutely do what he has to do to bring things round in his favour so as to ensure that he doesn't lose face or anything else by way of any business which he is either attached to or heading or whatever it may be. I mean, there are two examples I think of immediately. The one which, well, actually, now that I think of it, there's three. The one which a lot of people will know, of course, was when the legal dispute arose over the breeding rights concerning Rock Gibraltar, who Alex Ferguson was of the understanding that he owned a share of, and was presumptuous that included all the bells and whistles that went along with it regarding whatever the horse did once it finished racing. But as we now know, of course, that ended up in a bitter legal mess or whatever, and the bottom line was that Mr. Ferguson ended up being the loser in that instance. Anyway, I must say it was always give me great pleasure when I see him having success in horse racing in other places. I know he's a couple of very useful jump horses with Paul Nichols, and I'm sure there are flat horses running in his name somewhere too, but at the end of the day, I suppose he did come out the wrong side of the of the tangle with the Coolmore boys, and you would imagine there's a lesson in that for a lot of people. You know, I suppose the Jamie Spencer situation I mentioned there a minute ago, in that he was all fine and dandy and all guns were blazing until they received a few knockbacks and the young Tipperary man was duly shown the door. But the worst case which I ever come across was, and I used to know the exact details of this, but I can't actually just remember off the top of my head. A particular O'Brien horse had got beaten in one of the big meetings during the summer. Now, I honestly can't remember which one it was, but Magner was interviewed by the press a short time after the race, and his comment was, and I quote, because this made my right jaw drop even more than my left side did, and it was the side that was affected when I had 2 strokes first, before, during or after birth, and the medics told me then I had another one 12 years ago. But the Magner take on the situation was, and I quote, Aidan has apologised for the way his horse ran and his mistake, and we'll move on from it. Now, Aidan O'Brien should under no circumstances have to apologise to him or anyone else, because yes, they come up with the stock and are major players, I suppose, in the bloodstock industry, not only in Ireland but all over the world. But I always think, even allowing for all that a very high percentage of the success they have been able to enjoy for as long as I can properly recall horse racing, and probably for a very long time before that, a very large percentage of that has to be down to the man's training the horses, and things like genius and other descriptive words like greatest of all time, or what he done will never be beaten, or any of this sort of stuff. They get thrown around in journalism and media coverage of sport. Media coverage of a lot of things, but particularly sport. These things get thrown around like snuff at a wake. But in the case of Aidan O'Brien, it is absolutely indisputably true, and that Wagner would come out and make such sweeping and frankly insulting statements about the man on television that was being beamed all over the world, would surely leave anybody wary of going down in that general direction to work. So while I could absolutely, totally and utterly see the lure of it, From a jockey's perspective, I would earnestly hope that at the very least Colin Keane would have a good long hard think before he would make any decision if such a scenario did present itself. But I would really love to see him staying based in Dunsany, but I suppose we will have to wait and see for a while to see how that story develops. But now, as I said a moment ago, you would think, or a few moments ago, you would think all of the above would be enough headline making news within horse racing for one weekend or short period of time, but not the colour of it when it was announced yesterday evening around dinner time that the veteran high class, indeed world class trainer, the great John Ox, was to hang up his training reins or lead reins or whatever cliche we like to use at the end of the season. Now, I honestly can't say that I'm shocked or even surprised by the decision, but it is still one that would cause quite a degree of sadness, especially in this locality with which John would have very strong connections, and we believe he may actually have even been born in the area while his father, John Sr., who was also a very decorated and venerated trainer in his time, worked at both Hilltown Stud and Wood Park Stud, both of which were within 2 miles of my front door, so there would indeed, certainly among the race following public in the area, there would indeed be great sadness at the news that John had decided to call time on what has been an absolutely remarkable training career, but at the same time I would imagine there would be a general acceptance that it can't be classified as the greatest of surprises. Now, I remember, I don't know, was it last year or 2 years ago, when it was announced that Patrick Prendergast was winding up his own training operation and moving in, as it was put at the time, to train jointly with John in Currabeg. Now, I honestly don't know what has become of Patrick Prendergast. In the meantime, he seems to have sort of disappeared off the racing scene, for want of a better way of describing it. But it cannot count as the greatest shock to see John heading for his final curtain, because certainly from the time His Highness the Aga Khan firstly withdrew his stock from Currabeg, and then Christopher Choi, the owner of See the Stars, did likewise, while none of us with a sentimental streak within us would like to think of John's stock being on the wane within the racing fraternity, especially given the prowess with which Dermot Weld and indeed Kevin Prendergast and some of the other members of the older brigade had managed to keep their ships afloat. Of course, the heartstrings were saying that John could and most likely would proceed to do likewise in his own reserved, understated way, but sadly, as we now know, that will not be the case, although in researching a few little bits before doing this tribute piece about John, if you want to call it that, I would have to say that first of all, I wouldn't have known a whole pile about him until maybe the last decade or so, because after See the Stars had lit up the racing world in 2009 and left a legacy which will be carved in stone in the annals of Irish racing for generations to come. John Ox was well and truly an established superstar within the sport long before that had ever transpired, and if anything, at the time the See the Stars success story sort of relaunched the follically challenged genius back into the big time and into the shop window, and directed some of the game's biggest owners back in his direction, and indeed he did profit, probably understandably so, for a few seasons after the See the Stars love-in, I suppose you could call it that, had died away, because he will forever be not only associated with the Cape Cross Colt, but will of course be a worthy recipient of a coronation of sorts, as the architect who masterminded the horse's blast of brilliance, which made horse racing and flat racing in particular transcend facets of society which not in a bazillion years would it otherwise have flickered on the radar even. But as I say, like John Ox was the real deal, and a world class real deal, and an understated real deal, an absolute gentleman long before See the Stars arrived on the scene. I mean, even from my admittedly limited knowledge of the flat racing scene back in the day, all I would have to do would be think of horses like Ridgewood Pearl and Cinder, and as I say, See the Stars and a Lambshire, and there are probably countless others which I just can't think of off the top of my head at the minute. But the bottom line is that it was plainly obvious that John Ox could and did deserve his place right up at the very ascendancy of the sport, and repeatedly proved his worth as regards being up there. And you know, after, I think, and now this is only my own opinion, but I think from the time Christopher Choi took his horses not only out of John's yard but out of Ireland altogether, I think whatever horses he has now, the majority of them are now with William Haggis, I think. But when Christopher Choi sort of withdrew his stock out of Ballydoyle, or out of Currabeg rather, it sort of, I won't say it spelled the end, but it did sort of see John drop out of the limelight, and you know, there were others like obviously Aidan O'Brien and Dermot Weld and Jim Bulger. Them three were obviously still the standard bearers in their spear, but I mean, if you look at it and think, following on from them, you had two more O'Brien boys and Ger Lyons and Ken Condon, Johnny Murtha. I mean, there was absolutely no shortage of lads just chomping at the bit to, and eventually managing to catapult themselves up towards the higher echelons of the sport. And even though John was supported by some of the biggest and most recognisable owners around the world in the last couple of years, by which I mean Godolphin and Michael Stud, the inescapable fact is that while he was getting horses off these people, in reality he was only getting the third and fourth choice horses, or as somebody very close to me has a penchant for saying, the shakings of the bag. And I just think it's so sad, and in my view so needless, that a man like John should be allowed more or less to fade away from a sport which he graced with such grace and dignity and class for so long without nearly a whimper. But certainly the achievements of John Knox and some of the marvellous horses that he has had under his care over the years will never be forgotten, and I would hope, now knowing John and the type of person that he is, I would imagine that he wouldn't be into doing media work or punditry or that, but he would certainly be a most fascinating man to study if from a viewing point of view. The opportunity did arise to hear him articulate his wider thoughts on the sport and God knows what, but even besides that, the contribution of John Knox to Irish life and the bloodstock industry and the racing end of it in particular, and what he achieved via his horses will never ever be forgotten, and you would hope that he would still remain in the public arena and in and around racing for a good while yet, because people like him and of his vintage are too good and too valuable a commodity to be allowed simply retire and fade off the scene altogether. Now, again, I would just say that I don't think media pomp and limelight and that would be John's thing, but he would certainly be A, most deserving of it, and B, a very insightful, very articulate man who would be absolutely well worth listening to, and that is something which I know myself, because after See the Stars had his glory laden year in 2009, we in St. Peter's GAA Club put on a reception one evening for John and his wife Katrina, because, as I mentioned, John's father was a person who was held in the highest repute in this locality, having worked in Hilltown Stud and Wood Park, but even more than that, John's late uncle Jimmy was an extremely revered individual in GAA circles, and was one of the mainstays in keeping hurling afloat in the village 60 or 70 years ago. Indeed, collecting money and putting some of his own money, etc., towards the purchase and upkeep of hurlers by way of keeping your hurling team rolling. So, these were people that were held in the highest of esteem in our locality, which was absolutely amazing to be able to honour John and Katrina, and indeed his extended family's contribution to Dunboyne, and while in the case of John and Katrina, their contribution to Irish life, and from a local perspective, the contribution of the Ox family to the locality, which stretched far beyond sporting matters as well. And I'm just thinking here of one particular photograph which I will at least try to get my one working hand on and lob in at the end of this video the photograph of myself and my dad with John Ox and shall we say the other Sean Boylan on the night of that particular presentation up in the GAA club in 2009, and at a time like this, things like that become even more treasured possessions than would already have been the case. Moving on quickly now to news of darts, and again, I am not sure whether I mentioned this earlier in the broadcast, but if I haven't, I most certainly have made reference to it in my writings over the past couple of weeks, that when dealing with mental health strains or difficulties or whatever you want to call it, I know one of the foremost ways in which it hits me is that I would end up losing interest in things that otherwise should be the central tenets of my survival plan for life, namely sport and farming, and it was for that reason that over the last weekend, I think it was, I happened to notice that Gerwin Price won what I think was the World Grand Prix in the darts, defeating some unknown chap with an impronounceable name in the final, but it really sort of hit home to the point of nearly sickening me to realise that had been ongoing and televised over the previous week, at least the previous week, if not longer, and that I hadn't even been tuned in enough to notice that it was on. But I would hope that corners such as that would appear to be at least turnable at this point in time. Now, I'm not around them, I'm not even approaching the bend yet, I would say, but there has been a slight shift in my mindset regarding looking for morsels of positivity at the moment, and even though I was disgusted that I missed out on the World Grand Prix, last week as it is now. It did sort of light a spark with regard to the World Championships, which of course will be approaching fairly rapidly towards Christmas. God knows what that dreaded C word is going to be like this year, but look, we'll jump that fence when we come to it. But the one thing you can say is that ahead of the World Championship, that Gerwin Price, while in some cases he may be the most aggravating individual to ever stand on a knocky, you cannot for a moment question his alacrity at what he does, and it would be no surprise if he was to again be to the fore at the Alexandra Palace around Christmas time, but that is something which we will go into in much more detail nearer the time. My only reason for mentioning it was that seeing about it on Sky Sports News after the event was something of a double-edged sword, because while it made me absolutely sick to miss out on the action that had gone on last week, it did, however, light something of a spark to have me going to look and see what the next live televised darts action was going to be. Excuse me. And when it was going to be. So we'll have that lined up, and I'll be properly tuned in for that. The other thing, and you will see in an article which I've just nearly finished writing, which I hope to post on the site either late tonight or in the morning, that it wasn't only the darts that I think and hope lit a bit of a spark in this general direction at the moment, as regards at least trying to appear a little bit more enthusiastic about sporting issues, even if it's not anywhere near where I would like it to be in terms of being psyched up or totally tuned in or anything like it. However, I think seeing the story about the darts and the other one, which I am just about to mention now, have at least, I suppose to one sense, provided a crumb of comfort to myself that I'm not gone completely into a state of lunacy, and that there is still something of a spark there in me, which only sport can generate, and I would hope that if I can just be physically and emotionally strong enough to have a look at some of the stuff that is ongoing or coming up even, it should lead me to at least start to enjoy things a little bit more again, and when I begin to enjoy things is when the thoughts start flowing, the words start flowing, and the experience on Boylan Talk Sport for myself and for you, the viewers and readers, gets considerably better. But I suppose apart from the darts, the other story which brought about the inward reflection, I suppose if one wanted to call it that, was Eamon Sweeney in not last Sunday's was it last Sunday Independent, or was it the previous week? He had a full page piece pertaining to LeBron James and his influence on the Los Angeles Lakers in the NBA, and it was a combination of seeing that piece and the results of the darts tournament that lit something of a spark within yours truly to at least begin to try and rev up a little bit of enthusiasm for yours truly relating to whatever sport may be lying ahead between now and the end of the year, and indeed sure into the new year. Who knows what who knows what the sporting world is going to throw up, or what will be on or won't be on. But at least for now, once that blasted international week is done with in the soccer, at least the Premiership will be back in action by way of cheering a sports follower up, and in the case of this one, keeping him sane. Of course, the horse racing is always there. GAA as of now is still slated to come back on stream, although I don't see that happening anytime soon, even though all the games are fixed, and Meath are indeed playing Dublin that weekend, next weekend. But given the frequency and volume with which cases of COVID-19 are spreading up the north in particular, it is particularly difficult to ascertain whether GAA matches can proceed up in the 6 counties at the moment, and if so, what techniques, what arrangements will be put in place to deem it possible to play these games, even if, which it naturally will be at this stage, behind closed doors. So look, that will be very interesting to see in that regard. For now, I think that will do me, folks. I hope I haven't bored you to death. My sincere thanks to you all for your continued support, both of the articles on the website and this particular weekly sports show. So, on that note, I will leave you be, and I will talk to you all next week, please God.